5 Live Formula One.
Hello and welcome to Qatar. Welcome to the Lusail International Circuit, where it is Sprint Saturday. There is something special in the air here in Qatar this afternoon, as we think we may see Max Verstappen crowned a 3-time world champion. It could happen today at the end of the sprint race. He is in the form of his life. Fastest in practice yesterday. Pole position for him in qualifying yesterday, which of course set the grid for Sunday's Qatar Grand Prix. And today, it is all about the sprint. It's a sprint weekend. So the schedule was already a little bit skewed, but it's skewed a little bit more. If you are joining us thinking you're about to witness the sprint shootout, you're going to have to wait a little bit longer, I'm afraid, because at the end of running yesterday, Pirelli, the sole tyre manufacturer in Formula One, saw some things they didn't like in the tyres. Some damage, which they tell us you could only really see with a microscope, but big enough damage for them to alert the FIA, the governing body of Formula One. And some changes have been made to the schedule today. So we're going to have a familiarisation session at the top of the hour, 10 minutes for the teams and drivers to go out and have a look at the circuit, because some changes have been made to the track limits. That's around turns 12 and 13. They've been moved by about 80 centimetres and an extra part of the track has been painted. So the drivers will have 10 minutes. Doesn't sound very much. I'm watching the track being painted at this very moment. We've got some live pictures of that. So work's still ongoing as we count down to the top of the hour. Luckily, I'm in the company of some fine gentlemen to help talk us through this familiarisation session and then the subsequent sprint shootout. Our lead commentator, Harry Benjamin, and our racing driver this weekend is Alex Brundle. Great to be chatting with both of you. It's a bit of a funny one, isn't it? A sprint Saturday with a twist, I'm calling it. How do you like the sound of that, Harry?
Well, yeah, track familiarisation session rolls off the tongue, doesn't it?
Yeah.
For a lovely new additional session. Well, I think the drivers will probably be quite appreciative of it, because the nature of the sprint weekend, as you quite rightly alluded to, changes the format anyway. Only got one practice session, and even before these changes have come in for the tyres, this track was slippery, it was dusty, it was the cars were being affected a lot by the wind as well. It was just a tough one to get any kind of proper reading on. So I think, Alex, they'll be quite grateful for an extra 10 minutes regardless of what it's doing for the tyres.
Very helpful for the team, certainly, to get a feel for the circuit. I think we should just cover off exactly what they're doing and why. Through turns 12 and turns 13, the circuit is being tightened and being made slightly narrower, bringing the white line in towards the centre line of the racing circuit, if you like. And what they're trying to do are keep the drivers off the rearmost edge of the raised curbs. It's about a 5 centimetre drop off the back of the raised curb. So basically, by moving the track limits in, they're preventing the drivers routinely running over the back edge of those curbs. And that is what the tyre manufacturer Pirelli are stating is causing this damage to the tyre, which, if left unchecked, may potentially lead to an eventual delamination or failure of the tyre. So this is a session for the drivers to get a feel for the new confines of the circuit over 10 minutes before they go for the sprint shootout.
And we are hearing that the drivers were not happy to hear about this morning, as you can imagine. They've already had limited running around the track. They said that they weren't asked or consulted about the possible solutions. And we're going to probably see speeds around 20 kilometres slower in these corners. So it's an interesting one. These curbs, these pyramid curbs, causing problems yet again. We saw that back in 2021. But this problem has reared its head again. So it's down to the fact that Formula One cars are spending longer and they're at a higher speed on these curbs, because of course this is a bit more of a bike track, a MotoGP track. So you might be wondering why it's affecting Formula One so badly. So this familiarisation session is an interesting one, because the teams are also slightly snookered about how long they can get out there. They don't want to use up more tyres. And actually, talking to some of the teams earlier on, they were saying they've even been pushing for the sprint shootout to be sort of divided into 2 parts rather than 3 parts. Such is their concern about the amount of tyres they have available to them, because Pirelli don't carry enough sets. I mean, we're living in a world where we're all focusing on sustainability and, of course, people trying to do the right thing. But suddenly we find ourselves in a bit of a tricky spot, don't we?
Absolutely, you're right. And looking at the amount of tyres that some drivers have left, most drivers are nearly out of new sets of softs. The fastest compound of tyre, the two Alpines have got no more left. Bottas hasn't got any either. Neither has Fernando Alonso. So they're down on tyres. They don't want to risk anything. In fact, the green light is now on at the end of the pit lane. So this track familiarisation session is underway, and Magnussen, Russell and Liam Lawson are straight out there. They are on the soft compound of tyre. But the thing is, Alex, what is interesting is these new curves. We spoke so much about them on the Friday as well, with the big drop-off they had, almost like a pyramid shape, 3 to 5 centimetre drop-off. The drivers quite liked them. Lewis Hamilton wanted them to be shipped around to places like Austria because it really helps with the track limit scenarios.
Well, they were also changed from the previous iteration of curve, which you'll remember was the standard FIA two-stage exit curve, and they've been changed to these single pyramid curves. So the issue that the drivers are having is the combination of the high-load track surface here and the curb structure damaging the tyre.
Alex Brundle, that's the voice you're listening to there, racing driver extraordinaire and broadcaster as well this weekend with us on BBC. Also with us is the BBC's chief F1 writer, Andrew Benson. Andrew, yesterday during qualifying it seemed chaotic, confusing. We had drivers losing their times, the two McLaren drivers falling down the order. That confused us all at the end of qualifying. Now more confusion. It feels like surely Pirelli should have been consulted about these curbs that have been changed as we came into this race weekend, or do they not really have a say when it comes to the track layout, track limits and all the sort of furniture that goes with it?
Well, I'm sure Pirelli were brought into the conversation, but I think it's important not to diminish the importance of what's gone on here. We're talking about potential tyre failures that have been discovered at very, very high-speed corners. And you'll all be familiar with the fact that Pirelli tyres have an issue with potential failure. It's one reason why the tyres are run at such high pressure. 25 psi for this weekend is the mandated front tyre pressure, and if you think back to the tyre war era, teams were running tyres at 13, 14, 15, 16 psi. The idea of the new tyres that were introduced a couple of years ago was for them to be more robust, so that they didn't have to run at such high pressure. That failed. The idea was also to stop them overheating as much as they do, to stop the drivers having to manage them so much. That also failed. Now, I'm told that the drivers were not happy this morning. The teams and the drivers did not find out before the media did. They had a meeting this morning. They all got together with Pirelli. They wanted some reassurance from Pirelli that they were safe. Some drivers, some extremely senior drivers, I'm told, were concerned about running at all. So while Formula One, Pirelli and the FIA are doing their best to play this issue down, this is not something that the drivers and the teams are happy about at all.
Andrew, we've spoken a lot over the last couple of months about the tyre tender process and that being up for grabs and Pirelli facing some opposition there. Do you think something like this could have a real impact?
Well, it's ironic, Harry. I'm pretty sure that Pirelli have got the new contract. It hasn't been confirmed yet. I'm still working on that story at the moment. Bridgestone, a Japanese company which supplied Formula One in various conditions, whether as a tyre war initially with Michelin, and then as a sole supplier between 1998 and 2010, were the opposition. But in the end, I think Formula One has done what they considered to be playing safe. By staying with Pirelli. There was quite a lot of pressure inside the sport for Stefano Domenicali, the F1 chairman, to go the other way. It doesn't look like that's what's going to happen. But this incident this weekend and the problems that I just outlined, that's exactly why some people were putting that pressure on for Formula One to move on to a different company.
It's an interesting time, isn't it? And if, for example, Max Verstappen does wrap up the title this afternoon in the sprint, which is only 19 laps, and they are saying, Pirelli, that the tyres can last 20 laps, could we see a boycott tomorrow, Andrew, do you feel? Seeing as the Drivers' Championship and the Constructors' Championship is all signs he's delivered, obviously pending, could they boycott the Grand Prix tomorrow if they are so disgruntled by what's happened, some of the drivers, and suddenly it'll be deja vu like we saw in Indianapolis in 2005?
I think in the end that won't happen. If you remember a couple of years ago in Saudi Arabia, in fact it was last year in Saudi Arabia, wasn't it? There was a different kind of safety concern. That was over a missile attack on an oil refinery nearby. lots of the drivers didn't want to run that weekend either. They were persuaded in the end to run. I'm sure the same thing will happen here. But I think the fact that Pirelli are saying that if problems continue to be seen through today, there's a possibility of mandating it to be a 3-stop race, just underlines how serious Pirelli are taking this, quite rightly, but also quite how serious the problem is. 3 stops. Can any of you remember when there was last a 3-stop race? We're talking about the very beginning of the Pirelli era, I think.
Some people 3-stop back in Suzuka, but I'm not sure they intended to.
Yeah, exactly. It's not very common, Alex, is it? That's the whole point. They're normally 1 or at most 2 stops these days. So that's an underlining how serious this is, even if the senior figures involved are trying to play it down officially. It's going to be interesting to hear what the drivers say about it later.
It's interesting as well that apparently the teams and drivers didn't see any of the damage that Pirelli was seeing yesterday evening. And as I said at the beginning of the programme, it was more a case of under the microscope you could see this damage. So there was no feedback from the teams. They didn't see anything on their data. So this is Pirelli being ultra cautious. Talking of being ultra cautious, Alex, the drivers obviously out there familiarising themselves with this new track layout. We're talking 80 centimetres, which in Formula 1 terms is huge by moving track limits here or there. But how safe would you be playing it in this particular 10 minutes? Do you want to push the edge, push the limit, or what's it all about, this 10 minutes? How would you be doing it?
These teams and drivers will be grabbing hold of these 10 minutes of extra practice when they've only had, of course, that one free practice session this weekend to get their heads around it. They will be grabbing these moments with both hands. And for me, as a driver, I would be getting out there and getting as much work done as possible. Now, single tyre suppliers are notoriously cautious. There is only one negative piece of PR that a single tyre supplier can ever take from a weekend like this. A Pirelli shod car will always win every Grand Prix because they're on every single car. The only thing that can ever go wrong for them is if a tyre fails. So they mitigate that to the absolute end of the earth, and that's what you are seeing going on here. I don't think the teams and drivers, as a driver, and I'm a little bit more that way, I'm a little bit more go for it inclined as a driver in general, but as a driver I would not be too worried, and I would be trying to take the maximum out of this session.
And that is the voice of racing driver Alex Brundle, alongside myself, Harry Benjamin. We also have Rosanna Tennant in the pits and the BBC's chief F1 writer Andrew Benson on hand. And if you're just tuning in, expecting the sprint shootout, qualifying for this afternoon's sprint race, well, we're actually nearly at the end of an added on 10 minutes. We've had a track and are having a track familiarisation session, and this is over some tyre safety issues. That's what we've been discussing, that have been brought up by Pirelli and investigated by them and the FIA after yesterday's practice and qualifying running on the Friday. So now drivers out on the track, everybody out on the track, and has been for the last 10 minutes to get the lay of the land of a slightly altered track. Some of the curves have been flattened, particularly around turns 12 and 13 with the track limits altered, and that means all the drivers need to get an idea of how that has affected this track layout. We are at the Lusail International Circuit, 5.4 kilometres, just over 3.3 miles, 16 turns, 6 to the left and 10 to the right. At the moment, Max Verstappen is fastest in this acclimatisation session for Red Bull, a 1:27.0. This will come to an end in about a minute's time. Then we'll have about 10 minutes or so. We will be staying on air for that before we then head into the sprint shootout, qualifying for the sprint race. What have the drivers been learning then, Alex? We've got literally 54 seconds left of this added on 10 minutes. What have you picked up so far?
Well, most of the field have been out there on the soft compound tyre, just trying to improve the balance. You've got to remember the last time they tested, plumes of dust were flying out from behind the car, so they've got a much better feel for the balance as it's going to be in a few moments' time in the sprint shootout. What we're garnering from this session, you've obviously lost two of the most high-speed apexes on the circuit. So those have been slowed significantly in terms of their speed. Cars like the McLaren will lose slight benefit around the lap because those are the cars that will take more speed through those apexes, perhaps at the very highest of speed. So it will slightly adjust the pecking order. The other offshoot for this session is they've all had to go out, they've all had to use some tyres, and there are no more tyres in the pool. Now, I can see that from both sides. Firstly, Pirelli must be sitting there thinking, well, if you all want more tyres, where on earth are these extra tyres going to come from? We don't carry tyres pointlessly around the world, we carry the allocation. That's what we've been asked to do from a sustainability mindset. You can see it from the team's perspective, where they go, well, you want us to run, and then you want us to three-stop in the race, potentially. We've already done our tyre strategy. We've already handed back sets of tyres to you. Why do you keep moving the goalposts? So strategically, this is a massive curveball, both in terms of setup and in terms of tyre strategy for the teams.
So it's no wonder then the drivers were not happy finding out via the press initially.
Now you'd be grumpy. You'd be very,
I wouldn't want to be on the grumpy side of Alex Brundle, that's for sure. We are at the end of this track familiarisation session now. The checkered flag has come out on this additional 10 minutes. Max Verstappen already in his pit box. Quick practice pit stop as he is then put up on the jacks, and that Red Bull is wheeled back into the garage. This is the sound of Verstappen earlier on from being on track, coming through the right hander, and just as a little snap, here he is.
Oh, went off.
Could have continued the lap match. It's up to you, it was more learning.
What do you mean? I was on track.
That's fine, but it's not qualifying, and you could have learned from turn 6 to turn 16. But box now.
So that was Gianpiero Lembiasi. I always enjoy him and Max Verstappen's conversations on the radio. He did run off wide and actually went so far there is a little bit of gravel which he went through as well.
But that gives you a feel for how critically they're taking this session. Even when he's effectively binned it through the exit of turn 5, they still want to get a high-speed run through the rest of the corners to turn 16 because they're grabbing every single kilometre of testing that they can get before they run into this afternoon and this evening.
Well, that is the end of this session. Max Verstappen was fastest with a 1:27.0 ahead of Leclerc, Ocon and Gasly and George Russell, the top 5. But we're not really reading too much into that time. But we'll have a little bit of a break. We're staying on the air, though, before we get ready for the sprint shootout, Rosanna.
Absolutely. If you are just joining us, we've just completed this familiarisation session added into the schedule earlier on today for the teams and drivers to familiarise themselves, funnily enough, with the track that has changed a little since yesterday. Track limits around turns 12 and 13 being changed, moved by 80 centimetres, an extra part of the track also being painted. So the drivers keen to get out there to see what has changed, but also keen not to use too many tyres up, because the reason for this schedule change is that Pirelli saw some things they didn't like yesterday evening after all of the track running. Some damage to the tyres, separation within the tyres after certain mileage. So they are estimating around 20 laps on a tyre is when we become a little bit critical on how the tyre is going to behave. We don't want it to obviously explode, to break up. And so this is why we've had this extra session put in for the drivers to have a little look at the track. We will now have a few minutes break before the sprint shootout starts at 20 past. So do stay with us. Plenty to talk about this weekend anyway, as we get closer to perhaps seeing Max Verstappen crowned a 3-time world champion. If you were with us during that little extra practice session for the drivers, you'll have heard Max Verstappen on the radio to his race engineer, Gianpiero Lambiase. And Harry, you said, they're still taking it so importantly and critically. Every little thing matters, even though it seems like Max is so nailed on to be a world champion again this evening.
Yeah, and that's what's quite interesting. Everyone knows that from Verstappen's perspective at least, he's going to clinch the championship one way or another, whether it's done in a sprint weekend, on a Saturday or a Sunday. It's just a foregone conclusion. He's actually not really focused, at least publicly in his words, on that. He's an out-and-out racer, and this is a big issue. Let's not downplay what's going on here this weekend with the tyres and with this track. There's been a lot of positive noise about this track as well. We haven't been here since 2021, and we've come back. They've resurfaced the track as well. Technically, the FIA did label it a new track, but it is the exact same layout from 2021. But it is technically tricky. hearing what some of the drivers said after qualifying yesterday for the Grand Prix, the likes of Yuki Tsunoda further down the field in the AlphaTauri and Alex Albon in the Williams as well, saying from corner to corner, we're not quite sure what the car's going to do. High speed, it's tricky to get a balance. And when you've only had one practice, plus now an additional 10 minutes, they need every inch of track time they can get. So it's no wonder they take it so seriously. And it's good to see.
But you know what? I like that. I like the fact that the drivers don't know what the car's going to do from corner to corner. These are 20 of the best drivers in the world. And we add Alex Brundle onto that list, of course. But, you want to see them really push. This is what it's all about. But obviously, the tyre issue is a different argument altogether. But I like the fact that there's, difficulties and challenges for the drivers when they head out on a track like this.
It's a massive challenge. The problem that they have is they have no time to actually set about overcoming that challenge. It is a little bit like sending great tennis players out onto the court at Wimbledon without rackets and then calling it super entertainment to play the other side of the coin from a driver's perspective. That being said, yes, we are seeing their ability to control a racing car at high speed being tested to the limit. And we've seen it so many times, the complaints come in, the moments happen in practice, in qualifying, and lo and behold, at the end of a Grand Prix distance, who's at the front? But the best drivers in the best cars. Could be by an inch, could be by a mile, but they just seem to be able to deliver whatever the difficulties are that are being decried for that particular weekend out on the racetrack.
Well, let's turn our attention to the sprint shootout now then, because we got a little amuse-bouche, shall I call it? A little can of
hors d'oeuvres.
Whatever floats your boat on this particular Saturday, of what perhaps might be coming down the track, because we had our qualifying session yesterday, Max Verstappen on pole. The McLarens, I think, definitely had the pace to be right up there, but of course track limits playing into how things actually stacked up at the end of the qualifying session. Are we going to see the same sort of outcome during this sprint shootout, do you think? Or will things change just because of the whole way this day has unfolded?
Quite possibly. I think what we saw yesterday as well was track evolution. There is no support categories running this weekend. So normally there's usually some sort of Porsche race or a Formula 3 or a Formula 2 race supporting us on a Grand Prix weekend that allows the track to continue to rubber in and gain more grip even when the F1 cars aren't out on track. That isn't happening here. So effectively overnight, it's almost sort of gone back to green a little bit, and it gets covered in a little bit more sand, a little bit more dust. They've managed to do 10 minutes of clearing it up now. But I think that has a real effect. The wind speed as well, as we mentioned earlier, has a real effect on the balance of the cars. And one mistake can lead to massive implications. We saw yesterday, although Lando Norris in the McLaren was ultra fast, he kept exceeding track limits. And he opened himself up and said, look, I just made so many mistakes yesterday. So actually, even though the competitive order might not differentiate that much, with Red Bull and Max Verstappen being at the top, McLaren, Mercedes, nip and tuck, and Ferrari there as well, this track, it's way harder to call than that, I think. It's my cop-out answer.
No, but I think that's really interesting because Mercedes, the two drivers obviously benefiting the most from yesterday's track limit saga, with George Russell lining up on the front row for tomorrow's Grand Prix and Lewis Hamilton P3, they've been saying, their trackside engineering director Andrew Shovlin saying, neither George or Lewis lost a lap to track limits throughout the entire qualifying session, and that's important. We have to give them credit for keeping it clean. Well, that's the point, isn't it? You've got to be in it to win it. And so you can have a great car, speedy car, suits the track. McLaren obviously one of those teams that all applies to, but if you can't put the car where it needs to be, then you're not going to reap the rewards. So again, a bit of consistency from Mercedes yesterday. Will that show through again today when everyone, I'm sure, will now be a little bit more dialed into the track limits, especially as they've just had this familiarisation session? I do. It does make me laugh how this is all unfolded. It's a bit chaotic. I have to say, I'm just watching people sort of trying to make, trying to find sort of head nor tail of the whole situation in the paddock. People wandering around asking, have you heard what's happening, what's going on? But here we are. We find ourselves at the beginning of the sprint shootout. The teams and drivers getting ready to go back out on track now for another power 44 minutes, isn't it? It's a shorter sprint shootout than a normal qualifying session.
Yeah, it sure is. It's kind of, everything's shortened. Race is shortened to 19 laps. Qualifying process shortened to 44 minutes. And it's another textbook episode of my favourite Formula One chat, which is you're not racing the track, you're not racing the wind, you're not racing the temperature, you're racing the others, aren't you? And whatever it takes to make sure that you either do the fastest lap in qualifying or find yourself up the road in whatever length of race it is, that's the game. That's what these drivers are out there aiming to do, using their skills and ability behind the wheel, using their best strategic nous in the pit lane. And at the end of the day, there will be, whether there's dust on the track or a tyre issue or so on and so forth, there will still be those 25 points, providing we go the full distance, for the winner available at the end of the Grand Prix on Sunday evening. So they need to get after it, and that's what we are seeing the teams do and prepare for this sprint shootout session, which will be over three distinct parts. The medium compound tyre, of course, it's important to remember, mandated for the first two parts, and then they move on to the soft compound tyre for the final part to set the grid for the sprint.
Absolutely, and the cars are just, and the drivers in them are just getting ready before we get back out underway on track for this sprint shootout on a weekend that could be quite important for Max Verstappen.
Absolutely. We've just seen him being strapped into his car. I can hear his car being fired up through the walls that take you through to the garage and then to the pit lane. People now starting to settle down in front of a screen here in the F1 paddock to try and monitor what is going on. Who will be fastest in this sprint shootout? We've got cars on track, so Harry, it's over to you in the commentary box.
We do indeed. The two Ferraris are out on track. Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz. Sergio Perez follows, and Lance Stroll as we get underway for the sprint shootout. But as they slowly make their way out, it is a big weekend for Max Verstappen, but it's not just a big weekend for him, it's also a big weekend across 5 Live as well. It's our biggest ever weekend of sport. The most amount of commentaries we've ever brought to your ears across 5 Live, 22 to be precise. So as we are about to enjoy the sprint shootout here with us today, we've also got Premier League action in the form of Burnley versus Chelsea with Ian Dennis and Izzy Christensen, not to mention Rugby World Cup action with England back in action against Samoa. That's on 5 Live with commentary from Matt Dawson and Kat Merchant from 4:45. We'll be on BBC Sport app and website for the sprint race from about 6:30, depending on what happens after this. And then once the rugby's all done, we'll be on 5 Live as well. So much to get stuck into, and that's just Saturday today. But back here in Qatar at the Lusail International Circuit, located about 10 kilometres away from the Lusail Stadium, where Argentina beat France to win the World Cup last year. About half an hour drive north from the city of Doha, and this is the sprint shootout. Qualifying for the sprint race today, and SQ1 is getting underway now. 3 sessions, as Alex mentioned, SQ1, SQ2 and SQ3, slightly shortened compared to the normal qualifying for a Grand Prix. This first session, 18 minutes, already down to 12 minutes, and actually make that 9 minutes and 22 seconds remaining.
43.3 degrees the track temperature in the only competitive session, which will occur at a similar time to practice.
Are we doing a prep lap or just an out lap? Can you let me know?
Yeah, AFIM still discussing plans.
Just make your decision. Don't overthink it. Make your decision. I'm on track now. Let me know.
Quite bold from George Russell on the radio.
Well, they're trying to, I would imagine they're trying to decipher all of the information that they've just gathered in that acclimatisation session, which they may well have used to ascertain whether they're looking for a prep lap or not. Obviously, a prep lap being a lap through at non-racing speed to build temperature and pressure into the tyre to get it in the absolute best working window, still crunching the numbers even as George is making his way out onto the track, and he'll come across the line to start his flying lap now. Already on their first flying lap of the session, both Ferraris, Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc, making their way through the middle and final sectors respectively.
Absolutely, everybody out there heading on the medium compound tyre, mandated for the sprint race rules, and the two Ferraris are out there in force as well. It will be Carlos Sainz in that scarlet red Ferrari as the sun glints off of his visor, cuts the beam and goes fastest, the only time we've had so far. It's a 1:29.047 for Carlos Sainz. Leclerc, though, is just about to head over the line as well, and he pips his teammate to 1:26.9 for Charles Leclerc, the two Ferraris. The only times out there at the moment, but the car's on track, and we are now starting to see a flurry of action. Important to note, we're in the daylight here. It's daytime, and the sun is out. Of course, track temperature 42.9 degrees, air temperature 35.8 degrees. Very different temperatures to what we'll be seeing when we actually go racing later this evening.
Yeah, it's a huge and stark change between when the sun goes down, the amount of circuit surface temperature that bleeds away the sun, still very much pounding down on this recently relayed tarmac of the Lusail circuit. George Russell pounding his way through the final sector of it, with a purple middle sector to his name in a Mercedes which has been so strong already throughout this weekend. Unexpectedly strong, it must be said, and George Russell unexpectedly fast, it must be said. 26.3 across the line.
Yeah, nice lap from George Russell with 6 minutes and 58 seconds remaining. Did he, though, have a little skirmish out wide and have a flirt with the track limits? We're just getting a replay of him, and he does bump over the curbs here. Some of these curbs do have quite an edge to them, and if you run the floor over, the sparks fly, the dust gets kicked up, and it can lose you lap time. And that looks like Russell did do a little bit going into turn 6, the left-hander. He managed to get that lap done, and he does go fast as Gasly in the Alpine has just slotted up behind him as well. Then Norris, Perez and Hamilton, the top 5. But Max Verstappen in the Red Bull is out there in the number 1 car and can clinch his 3rd Formula 1 world title today in the sprint race later this evening. Let's see how he gets on his opening gambit. He's fastest of anybody in the first sector, and he's 4.5 tenths up through the middle sector as well. Makes his way through the tight and twisty middle sector, now approaching into the final sector through the left-hander, out through turn 15. Little bit of traffic in the form of his teammate, gets nicely out of the way as he then heads through the right-hander. Foot to the floor, up through the gears, the DRS line comes, the rear wing flap slides open, the timing beam comes, he cuts across the line, and it's fastest by almost 8.5 tenths of a second, a 1:25.510 for the Dutchman. And
the Red Bull just tracking exactly where Max Verstappen points it, as though it's reading his mind through that final sector there. The rear just coming with the direction of the steering wheel as Alex Albon in his Williams starts his first flying lap. But a quite impressive poise and balance from behind the wheel of that Red Bull. That's a warning shot, 8 tenths clear of the rest of them on that first run on the medium.
Yeah, his teammate a second off at the moment and has come back into the pits, has Sergio Perez. We've only had 11 competitive times through at the moment, still waiting for the majority of the field to set their lap times. A reminder, just like Q1, we will eliminate the slowest 5 drivers come the end of this session, but everybody who hasn't set a lap time at the moment is out there currently with only 5 minutes to go, and we are already seeing some track limits times being deleted. Logan Sargent, the latest victim, along with Pierre Gasly as well, so they get their fast lap times deleted, and now only 12 drivers have a lap time, and Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari is slowest of them all.
You've got to wonder, with how tyre hungry this weekend may now be, the uncertainty with how many stops they're going to be mandated to make in the race, whether some of these times with the big gaps are not on a new set of medium compound tyres, or indeed if there are competitors who choose not to run in this sprint shootout with the knowledge they may well not score points in the sprint to save tyres through the rest of the weekend. Could that be an unseen effect of the issues we've been having with the Pirelli tyre?
Sainz gets up to 5th place in his Ferrari. Alex Albon was the sound you just heard in the background, fighting that Williams on a fast lap. He does come across the line, and it's 9th fastest for him. Verstappen is fastest. Then come the 2 McLarens, Norris, Piastri, Russell, Sainz, the top 5. Perez, Hamilton, Ocon, Albon, Tsunoda, the top 10. Nico Hülkenberg in the Haas, though, comes across the line and once again demonstrates his out-and-out one-lap qualifying pace in that Haas. Goes 6th fastest, just behind Valtteri Bottas, who got into Q3 in yesterday's qualifying. There's some pace in that Alfa Romeo yet.
Russell up to 3rd for the Mercedes. Looks like everybody is going to try and put a lap in across the line, but there are still some competitors a long way away from the pace, just cruising a lap in here. Interesting strategically, we've got Fernando Alonso, who's really the last competitive runner not to set a flying lap. He's making his way through the final corner now in the Aston Martin, looking to make his way across the line. It's not going to be that competitive from Alonso.
am I not safe? There's no point going again if I'm safe, but...
Lando, we want to open the lap again for some of the same concerns we had yesterday.
Sick from Alonso. They're talking about track limits potential there for Lando Norris.
Well, and speaking of, Lewis Hamilton has just had a lap time deleted as well. Norris asking if he's safe. He's about a tenth and a half back from Max Verstappen. Norris currently in second as well. Alonso, as you said, got up into fifth. So currently in that elimination zone, it's Kevin Magnussen, Liam Lawson, Lance Stroll, Logan Sargent, who had a lap time deleted, and Zhou Guanyu, who is also out there and needs to set a lap time. As it stands, in the next 2.5 minutes, they would all be eliminated, Rosanna.
Yeah, lots of chat on the radio at the moment with drivers questioning their team. We had George Russell, didn't we, demanding information from the team about what his run plan was. Then Nico Hülkenberg's been chatting to his engineer saying, I think we should stay in sequence. And then some confusion for Lando Norris and his engineer. Lando thought perhaps a double cool push, but his engineer saying no, push, cool push. So it's really interesting. A lot of discussion going on. Makes me feel people are a little bit stressed. It's all a bit fast and furious on this sprint Saturday.
I think that's what you get when these great race teams are presented with a lot of late information, which is very relevant to the session which they're about to do, as they were throughout that acclimatization session. They're trying desperately to be across all of the numbers, but they're having to work so fast here and give the drivers the information they need, and some cases of communication failure.
Lap times being deleted. Here's Charles Leclerc.
That was the win into turn 5, win into turn 5.
So that's the end of the double right-hander in the early part of the lap, and that's not the first time Leclerc's been off there.
There is a significant tailwind into that corner, which is a headwind down the main straight, so that gets underneath the rear wing of the cars and causing them issues with the balance.
So Leclerc, with a lap time deleted for track limits and running wide, he's currently down in 15th. He is on the bubble, Rosanna.
Yeah, he really is. And actually, he's already been told a little bit earlier on by his race engineer that the wind has really picked up. It's a lot stronger than it was. So lots to be aware of. And as I'm standing in the F1 paddock looking up, I can see the trees blowing in the breeze. It's been incredibly gusty here over the last 48 hours. We've had gusts of up to 60 kilometres an hour. So you can imagine that out on track. These cars are so sensitive to the wind. I know there are certain teams who feel it more. I'm thinking of Williams in that respect. But it's so difficult when it's changing corner by corner.
Zhou Guanyu in the Alfa Romeo is on a fairly good lap. His teammate at the moment is all the way up in 6th. Zhou Guanyu, it starts plumb last for the Grand Prix on Sunday in his Alfa Romeo. He crosses the line though, and his first competitive lap time gets him up into 11th for the Chinese driver, a 1:26.6. That knocks Leclerc down into the elimination zone. This is the sound of Kevin Magnussen, who comes across the line in the Haas. He can only do 17th. Leclerc is currently down into 16th as George Russell goes fastest. It's Leclerc, Magnussen, Stroll, Lawson and Sargent who are at risk at the moment with a yellow flag out in sector 1. It's gone away very quickly, so no damage done there. But Leclerc is not on a brilliant lap in the first sector. The middle sector, though, he's found a little bit more time. Can Leclerc get through into Q2? His teammate Carlos Sainz fell victim in Q2 yesterday. He did not manage to get through, but Leclerc has found a much better chunk of lap time in the middle sector. Sargent gets up into 14th in front of Albon. Perez goes into 8th. He should be fine there. What can Charles Leclerc do when he comes across the line? Lawson will come first. He goes up into 9th spot. Charles Leclerc, with just a corner remaining, rounds it, opens the DRS flap, crosses the line, and it's enough for 10th fastest. His teammate Carlos Sainz gets knocked down to 14th. Logan Sargent gets biffed out in SQ1. He will not be able to have another go at it. Albon's behind him. Lance Stroll still trying to find a way through. That's the sound of Tsunoda, who gets across the line and up into 15th. That knocks Zhou Guanyu down. What can Lance Stroll do? He was very angry after yesterday's qualifying performance. It's not good enough for Lance Stroll, who gets knocked down to 18th. Albon comes across the line in 17th, and Logan Sargent will not be able to go through either. He had a lap time deleted once again for track limits, so he doesn't even get a competitive lap time on the board. Sargent plumb last. Well, it all got a bit hectic there at the end of SQ1, didn't it? At the end of it, though, out of SQ1 goes. We're just seeing more lap times deleted, though. Yuki Tsunoda has just had a lap time deleted. So has Alex Albon. I'm nervous to call who's out because it's changing all the time on the timing screens as we get replays of Albon running wide. We saw Lance Stroll have a huge snap as well. As it currently stands, Lance Stroll is out in 16th in front of Alex Albon in 17th. Yuki Tsunoda 18th in the AlphaTauri. He just had a lap time deleted in front of Kevin Magnussen in the Haas and Logan Sargent in the Williams, who also had a lap time deleted.
Yeah, very hectic through the end. Stroll was the reason for your yellow flag in the early sector, and then Sargent not getting a time on the board at all, having found himself under pressure.
Hold the in P88, man. What were you doing?
Yuki Tsunoda, always a lovable character outside of the cockpit, but it's like night and day when he's in the cockpit.
There's a lot of stress going on in these teams this weekend, and we're just seeing Yuki Tsunoda finding his way wide through the mid-corner of the change section in turns 12 and 13. So he really, one of the victims of that circuit change, Yuki Tsunoda, doesn't feel the curb under his fingers, but he's well off the racetrack, just defaulting to the line that he's driven throughout the weekend so far, and that is what's put him in the drop zone in P18 in the AlphaTauri, with Liam Lawson in what could be his final race in that AlphaTauri, up just inside the top 10 in Q1.
Yeah, it was a tough qualifying yesterday for the rookie Liam Lawson, who comes in for another Grand Prix to replace the injured Daniel Ricciardo in what we expect will be his last Grand Prix in place for Daniel Ricciardo. Tough qualifying for him yesterday, but he is through into SQ2. So once again, to reiterate, out at the end of that session, it's Stroll, Albon, Tsunoda, Magnussen and Sargent.
Yeah, disappointing for Lance Stroll yet again, out in the early part of qualifying. He was so frustrated yesterday. I don't think I agree with how he behaved when he got out of the car, but he'll be frustrated again, I'm sure, not to make it through into the second part of the shootout. And you mentioned Liam Lawson there. What a great way to finish off his tenure in 2023 for AlphaTauri. Surely a great job interview when you then look at the timing sheets and you see Logan Sargent without a time set. He's going to have to go and hope he can take part in the sprint later on. More mistakes, and he told us, didn't he, back in Japan, these mistakes are killing me. Another one, or a few, for him again today. So disappointing stuff for the American driver, hoping to hang on to his seat in 2024. Kevin Magnussen, also pretty disappointing there. His teammate Hülkenberg, a little bit further up the road, not quite as mighty as we've seen from him in qualifying sessions thus far, but he's still made it through into the second part. What's wrong with K-Mag? Why can't he hook it up? Is it just the car or something not clicking particularly for him, do you think?
It's been a difficult weekend so far for Kevin.
He's a second off.
He was 1.1 off as well in qualifying yesterday, so he just hasn't got that car underneath him. It has to be said, Hülkenberg has been slightly better in qualifying, but it hasn't been to that kind of tune, has it, throughout the year? No,
Hülkenberg has now won the qualifying head-to-heads, but Kevin Magnussen speaking yesterday, this is the first time he's ever raced this track or even been on this track, and he did say after qualifying yesterday that it's taking him longer to understand this track and to basically remember it, which was a bit of a surprise. But because it is such a high-speed flowing track, when you've never been here, and even Nico Hülkenberg did race here in 2009 in the GP2 Asia Series, that's still a little bit more of an advantage. And he did win here, you're right, Rosanna. Good knowledge.
Yeah. Champion!
He did, him and Perez, I think it was as well. But that, learning a track, this is what I'm fascinated by. How difficult is that for someone like Magnussen?
A circuit like this is very, very tricky to learn, because you've got so few reference points around the layout. I mean, let's take you to Imola, for example. You're not going to confuse the Ravazza left-hander with the Varianti with the Agua Minerale.
No, who would do that?
Right-hander, are you? They are entirely different topography. It's entirely different scenery. You know, you've got the old boy who sits reading his paper on the apex of one, and the guy who lives on the apex of the other one. Whereas this is a circuit which looks very, very similar. It's desert, and it's desert everywhere. So it's hard to pick those reference points, especially for those long, fast corners where you need to get the turn in absolutely right.
We absolutely do. We're just awaiting for SQ2 to start. The sun is shining in Qatar as the lights will get ready to come on as the sun begins to set. But the crowds and the grandstands are quite full. People sitting on the grassy banks to enjoy this racing as we're nearly ready, Rosanna, for SQ2.
Absolutely. Golden hour here in Qatar. It's looking rather beautiful in the sunlight as the sun sets in Lusail. Just a note, the FIA stewards are going to be investigating after the session the following drivers: George Russell, Lewis Hamilton, Pierre Gasly, Liam Lawson, Logan Sargent, Yuki Tsunoda, Lance Stroll and Alex Albon for not following race director's instructions when that comes to maximum delta time. So stewards busy this weekend. Something else to think about when this particular shootout finishes. But we have cars back on track for SQ2. Oh, I think it's going to be frenetic again, I feel. They are under pressure this weekend, the teams and drivers.
We saw that kind of investigation yesterday for various drivers as well, and in it they all got let off, basically. What they have to do is come up with a reason why they didn't meet the maximum time, so why they didn't go fast enough to the start of their flying lap. And it certainly seems with these kind of investigations, as long as they come up with a relatively plausible one, then the FIA tend to let them off. You've basically got to prove you didn't hold anybody up on the way to the line. So that's definitely not a slam dunk in terms of a potential penalty for those drivers as we move into SQ2.
We absolutely do. Unlike normal Q2, which is 15 minutes long, SQ2 is 10 minutes, already down to 8 minutes and 46 minutes remaining of this second part of qualifying, where we eliminate the next chunk of drivers, everybody from 11th down to 15th. So it really is a battle to get into the top 10 for a top 10 starting position for the sprint race later today. Coverage of that getting going at 6:30 on the BBC Sport website and app, and then we'll move beyond 5 Live as well once the Rugby World Cup action finishes up there. But right now it is all eyes to the sprint shootout. We've lost Stroll, Albon, Tsunoda, Magnussen and Sargent, so no massive players. Stroll once again struggling in that Aston Martin, but that's a whole other topic of conversation that I'm sure we'll get onto at some point as George Russell begins a lap.
Yeah, this is the sound of George Russell heading through what Rosanna Tennant aptly described as a beautiful golden hour here in Qatar, with wind filling the flags, filling any trees in what is an arid landscape over this fast and flowing circuit. He's clumping the curbs through turns 4 and 5 and then braking on the one real large braking zone down towards turn 6. An armful of oversteer for Russell to top off what has been a purple first sector by dint of being the first driver to set a time through sector 1. Now he's making his way through a winding middle sector down towards turn 10, where Lando Norris lost his time yesterday and was deposed from the top 3 of qualifying for the Grand Prix on Sunday. George Russell now through the the changed section of the track. Turn 12 keeps it inside track limits and a generous lift out of the throttle to do the same through turn 13, heading down towards 14 and 15. The left-hander onto that outside curve. One challenge to go, and it's the long arcing turn 16. The Mercedes still dancing from the rear as George Russell opens the DRS, so the single DRS zone, and heads off down the 1 kilometre front straight. Set at 126.2, the benchmark for the rest of the field, the benchmark for Lewis Hamilton, which he will instantly overcome.
Hamilton goes fastest, a 126.0 for the 7-time champion. Sergio Perez going well during the middle sector as well. It is Red Bull comes out the final corner and crosses the line to also go fastest. So now the Mexican is on top with a 125.8 currently, but everybody out there at the moment, with the exception of Fernando Alonso in the Aston Martin, who does now come out, and Valtteri Bottas in the Alfa Romeo. Everybody else is out there. Medium tyres once again in use. And just as Hamilton went to the top momentarily, he was displaced by Perez and now Piastri, but he would have been displaced anyway. Track limits violation, lap time deleted. Max Verstappen, though, means business, back on top by nearly half a second, a 125.1 for the Dutchman.
Here comes Lando Norris in the second of the papaya McLarens that were definitely touted to be strong this weekend. It hasn't been so much the case so far. They've had some driver issues throughout the weekend, but ousts Verstappen at the front of the field to the tune of 2.5 tenths of a second, and that's quite the spectacular performance on his medium set of tyres.
Yeah, well, Lando Norris was asking, wasn't he, in SQ1, do I need to go out again? He was a tenth and a half back from Verstappen in second, and he decided no, he didn't need to go out again. So he has that advantage along with Max Verstappen. But unlike yesterday, Lando Norris needs to not get any track limits violations. That's what lost him a front row start for Sunday's Grand Prix. But this is all about qualifying for the sprint race, the shortened race, just 19 laps later on this evening once the sun goes down. And Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc both running wide and getting track limits violations at turn number 5. That's the end of the double right-hander in the first part of the lap.
Charles Leclerc caught out through turn 5. They've been struggling with the wind over the rear wing of that Ferrari, haven't they, throughout the qualifying session so far, and Charles Leclerc falling victim to it again there, losing that lap time. There are only so many you can lose. 4 minutes and 38 seconds left on the clock. You can run sequential laps on this medium compound tyre, but every single time you lose a lap, it's another potential to put further laps on tyres that are so at a premium throughout this weekend, or potentially even have to come in for a new set, which they'd be tight even on time to do at this stage. Esteban Ocon in a strong Alpine, sitting in 12th, make that 13th position, is making his way through the middle, and now the final sector.
Yeah, both Alpines really happy with their performances so far this weekend, getting into the top 10 in Grand Prix qualifying yesterday. They're liking the balance of this Alpine, brought upgrades as well to Qatar, new floor, rear corner and some cooling elements for Ocon and Gasly, and Ocon will be the first to cross the line. He's just coming into the middle sector now. He's about 6 tenths shy from Lando Norris's time.
That was off for me, for Ocon, through the middle of turn 12. We'll see if he keeps it.
Well, he's going to carry on regardless. He's a bit quicker and carrying some more speed compared to his teammate Pierre Gasly. Ocon has about a couple of tenths in hand over his teammate at the moment. One final corner for the Frenchman to navigate. Esteban Ocon in the 31 Alpine crosses the line and goes 5th fastest, 1:21.8. Will he keep it though? We thought we might have spotted a track limits violation. Hamilton pops up into 7th after having his lap time deleted. This is the sound of Pierre Gasly across the line. It's 9th fastest for Gasly.
Lovely stuff from Pierre Gasly, making his way into the top 10. That puts both Ferraris then in the drop zone. Sainz 2 seconds off. Leclerc without a time. Fernando Alonso pops up to 7th position in his Aston Martin, with Lance Stroll already out of the session. Both Ferraris coming across the line to try to redress the balance. Only 9th for Sainz, and that surely puts him under pressure. Can Leclerc do better? Yes, up to 3rd.
Leclerc with a 1:25.5 goes 3rd, but Sainz once again, that means he's already down to 10th. He is right on the bubble of being knocked out in consecutive days, the second part of a qualifying run on a Formula One race weekend. But you know what Carlos Sainz said yesterday after qualifying? He wasn't that surprised to have been knocked out in Q2. I spoke to a former Red Bull engineer who was actually analysing some of the data from yesterday's qualifying and said Sainz lost a couple of tenths, or a tenth to be precise, in that final corner, the right-hander. That would have seen him through. But it's again comes back to the fact this track, in every corner, you're not quite sure still how your car is going to handle, and Sainz just seems a little bit more uncomfortable at the moment compared to his teammate Leclerc.
It's an ever-evolving challenge as the circuit continues to rubber in, which it does aggressively here. The circuit taking up the rubber and cleaning away the dust, and also as the track and air temperature continue to fall. Carlos Sainz still sitting in the drop zone. Lap
time deleted for Carlos Sainz, so he was on the bubble. He's now going to have to do it all over again for track limits at turn 13. That's one of the reprofiled corners where they've changed the track limits area in the long, or the middle of the triple right-hander in the final part of this lap. So Sainz then now having to have one final go of it because there's only a minute and a half left.
So this is what we spotted when we're now having a look at Esteban Ocon's lap, and he, from our view in the commentary box, looks incredibly close to the track limits, but he may just have kept the right-hand wheels of the Alpine just inside on the mid-corner of turn 12 and out over the curbs. The moment for Charles Leclerc, though, much more of a slam dunk. He is all the way off the road, bouncing over the curbs. You can hear him bouncing over the curbs on the exit of turn 5.
So with less than a minute to go then in SQ2, In the drop zone, Gasly, Lawson, Sainz, Zhou and Bottas. The two Alfa Romeos are on fast lap. Carlos Sainz will get another lap of it. He'll only get one, though, to try and get through into the final part in qualifying. Knocked out in Q2 yesterday. Not hoping for a repeat once again. The Finnish driver, Bottas, crosses the line. It's not enough for another top 10 start for Bottas. 11th at best. His teammate, Zhou Guanyu, who had a complaint about Logan Sargent overtaking him on his fast lap in qualifying yesterday, currently has a clear track ahead of him. He's coming into the middle sector and actually only has one final corner to go for Zhou Guanyu. What can he do? It's not going to be as quick as his teammate, but he does slot in just behind Bottas. Bottas 11th, Zhou 12th.
7 tenths quicker than he was in Q1 yesterday. It's a good effort from both Alfa Romeos just on a single run. Lewis Hamilton puts himself up to 6th position, but George Russell easily up inside the top 3 in the other Mercedes. Let's see what Gasly can do across the line and out of the drop zone, up to 8th.
Puts Alonso on the bubble as well in the Aston Martin. He's just about to come across the line as well, but he gets that Aston Martin up into 4th fastest. I think Lewis Hamilton has just had a lap time deleted. That puts him at risk. He's down to 10th. Carlos Sainz is coming into the final sector now. He's got one more corner to go. Can the Spaniard get through into SQ3? He crosses the line for Carlos Sainz. It's enough for 5th fastest. That locks Lewis Hamilton out in SQ2, the 7-time champion. He's still out on track, but he won't get another lap. Hamilton is out of qualifying for the sprint. Sergio Perez will be one of the last cars to come across the line in his final flying lap, and he gets up into 3rd. He was right on the bubble previously. Norris is fastest. What's Hulkenberg got in the Haas? Nico Hulkenberg, just like Austria in the sprint shootout then. Once again, the Haas man gets into the top 10. Fantastic effort for the German.
It was a purple middle sector for Nico Hulkenberg. Fantastic work through what is arguably the most technical sector of the lap to put the car up into 9th position, but not a session for Lewis Hamilton whatsoever. Losing that lap time to track limits. We knew there would be a big scalp at some stage of qualifying, and losing the opportunity to go into SQ3 for the 2nd time in the last 3 shootouts. Lewis Hamilton, he's not had the best time in these miniature qualifying sessions throughout the season.
No, failing to reach SQ3 for the 2nd time in the last 3 shootouts for Lewis Hamilton. So out at the end of SQ2 goes Gasly in the Alpine, Hamilton in the Mercedes, Bottas in the Alfa Romeo, then Lawson, who has a lap time deleted at the very end.
Yeah, I'm sorry. My bad, guys.
And Julie apologises for it on the radio. He'll start at best 14th for the sprint, and Zhou Guanyu 15th and out at the end of SQ2.
There it is.
Well,
Liam Lawson wide through the exit of turn 15. Go on, Rosanna, tell us what you think.
Well, yesterday we saw big scalps fall in the qualifying session to set the grid for the Grand Prix. Today the big scalp is Lewis Hamilton. Perhaps you wouldn't put him right up there in 2023, but he seemed like he could challenge up at the front end of the grid. Surely after yesterday's qualifying performance, he will be really kicking himself. He couldn't seem to get the car to do what he wanted and to stay where it needed to be.
Turn 5, once again. Track limits, that's where he fell foul. That's the final part of the double right-hander in the 1st sector, and we've seen so many people make mistakes there, and it even catches out a 7-time champion.
Yeah, definitely. He'll line up behind the 2 Alpines, who had a good day yesterday in qualifying, but Gasly unable to make it through to SQ3. I wonder what Ocon can do now he has made it through into the final part of the shootout. And Hulkenberg, what a performance, given that his teammate Kevin Magnussen's down in P19, and we've already discussed how it's just not working for the Danish driver. But meanwhile, Nico Hulkenberg, with a car that's supposedly getting a massive overhaul in a couple of weeks' time when we head to Austin, Texas, he's still able to wrangle out a performance that gets him into the top 10.
It's a really important time for Nico Hulkenberg, obviously with those upgrades potentially coming for that Haas. There's always a hierarchy to who gets what and when those parts are available, and he could well be putting himself in the position to get everything first, which will be tremendously important for him. Magic performance in that middle sector, which runs from the entry to turn 6 through to the exit of turn 11. Purple, I know he ran relatively late, but Purple, fastest of anyone through that sector, and a fabulous job from him in the Haas. They need that because they know they're going to have some serious tyre degradation through the Grand Prix, as has been customary for the rest of the season.
Yeah, their tyres, they go through them like butter. Lando Norris fastest in that part of sprint shootout qualifying, and Russell and Perez also ahead of Max Verstappen. A little bit of attention being given to Max Verstappen's Red Bull, the mechanics on their knees having a little look around the car. Any concerns there? Just letting his foot off the gas a little in SQ2, ready, I'm sure, to take it to everyone in SQ3. Well, he does like to trick us, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's the false sense of security with Max Verstappen. I do wonder, we saw him off, didn't we, in the acclimatisation session, if that's what we're calling it, earlier on. And I do wonder, it was relatively quick turnaround between the two. Has there been any damage to the underfloor of that Red Bull, which could be losing him a little bit of downforce throughout the sprint qualifying? If so, that could be a reason. It's a place where you definitely don't want to lose that downforce. It's so load critical. The more downforce you lose more pace for it around here than at some other circuits. So could be an issue for Max Verstappen. In fact, you can see a lot of the teams on the shots we're getting in the commentary box diving immediately underneath the cars to have a bit of a look. So I don't think he's alone.
No, absolutely not. And he was so keen to back out of that lap, wasn't he? And Harry, you mentioned that he'd run over that gravel. Normally when they wheel the cars back, they're straight under there, sort of brushing out bits and pieces that may have got caught up. But the mechanics just looked like they were having a good old hunt around. But it's okay. He is out waiting for the third and final part of this sprint shootout to start, waiting at the end of the pit lane, obviously wanting to run first. Would that be the choice you'd have made, Alex?
I think it would, yeah, especially if I was Max Verstappen. I was relatively confident about the performance of my car. You want to try and get a lap on the board without any traffic. You've got to remember these sessions progressively shorter, so less and less and less time, only 8 minutes, to get the job done here. So it doesn't want any incidents. We've seen a lot of traffic incidents throughout free practice here in Qatar, more than perhaps you would expect over such a long circuit with especially so few cars out at a time. So he'll want to get a lap in as the sun goes down.
Yeah, it's looking glorious, I have to say, out here in the F1 paddock. I'm sure it's looking glorious on your screens as well in the commentary box, but you just don't have the temperatures to deal with that I am. So it's nearly time for SQ3. What were you going to say, Harry? Were you jealous?
Say, not jealous. Just one of the shots we got from our commentary box I thought was sums up the season quite nicely. We mentioned Max Verstappen was sitting there waiting on his own in the pit lane before anybody else could join him. You could see drivers out of their cars walking back, just him sat there in the cockpit in that number one car on his own, and that just I think sums up the season, hasn't it? He's been out there on his own and timed that well because the green light is now on, and off he goes. He's now joined by the two Ferraris.
Harry Benjamin painting pictures in the commentary box.
Let's hope they sent their team photographer out to capture that moment. That'll probably go on the memoir book of 2023 for Max
I got it on my
Verstappen.
phone. I'll send it to them.
Oh, there you go. Charge a big fee, will you? I feel like they've probably got a bit of cash. So here we go then. The third and final part, SQ3, now underway. Let's set the grid for the sprint later on this evening. This is your top 10 shootout. Let's have a look at how things unfold. Harry, talk us through it.
Yes, it absolutely is. The top 10 shootout for the sprint race later on this afternoon or this evening as the lights go down in Qatar. We have eliminated everybody from 11th down to 20th, and now it is all about who will start on pole for the sprint with 7 minutes and 8 seconds remaining as the Ferraris and Max Verstappen are out there very early on, and now they can get rid of that medium tyre and put on the fastest rubber, the soft compounder tyre.
More of an open qualifying session than I was expecting, but we've seen a bigger gap throughout this weekend from Red Bull and in the hands of Verstappen to everybody else, specifically on this soft compound tyre where it seems to plug in a little better. That being said, the Mercedes has been extremely quick. The Ferrari, when they managed to keep it between the white lines, has been extremely quick as well. So it's going to be interesting as the temperature continues to change. Air temperature down a solid 5 degrees from what we saw even at the beginning of this qualifying session. Track temperature down at 3 or 4 degrees. So as it continues to fall away through this session, it's going to be interesting to see who gets that tyre fired up and working.
As Max Verstappen starts his opening gambit and heads into into the sloping right-hander of turn 1 before very quickly you're into turns 2 and 3. It flows quite nicely here at the Lusail International Circuit, where we last visited in 2021. They've had a track resurface, pit and paddocks have been rebuilt, and now we begin the first of a 10-year stint here in Qatar's. Max Verstappen runs a little bit wide coming into turn 6, clouts the red and white painted curbs, kicks up a bit of dust that's offline, but he's purple, but he would be purple. He's the only one out there at the moment. Going fast. Sector 1 completed. So far, so good for the Dutchman.
The driver he has ousted, who is ahead of him on the road, the only driver ahead of him on the road, is Sergio Perez, who is about to come through the final sector and give us the first of the lap times, I believe. So our timing screen says we're following Max Verstappen, who's purple in both sectors so far. Everybody out there, of course, on the soft compound tyre. I say everybody out there, everyone who is out there. Got Russell, Alonso, Hulkenberg and Ocon still sitting in the pits, perhaps protecting a set of tyres here and running right at the end as Verstappen rounds turn 16, the final corner, and heads off down the 1 kilometre front straight to the line.
DRS flat flies open for Max Verstappen, and it is fastest with 5 minutes left to go of this final part of the sprint shootout. A 1:24.543 for the Dutchman. This is the sound of Carlos Sainz coming through the right hand of the final corner. The pit lane entry is to your right. The line for the DRS, the drag reduction system, is activated. Then he cuts the timing beam, slows down, and it's second fastest, a 1:26.9 for the Spaniard.
Yeah, it's a long, long way away, isn't it? Goodness me, a massive difference. You do wonder if Sainz has made some sort of mistake, and we've lost Verstappen momentarily from the top of the time screen. Is that track limit?
Lap deleted. Track limits at, can you guess which turn it is?
5?
Correct. Bingo. Turn number 5 for Max Verstappen. I think that's a first major track limits disgruntlement for Max Verstappen.
That's what we were waiting for, and that is what you need.
First lap was deleted for track limits at turn 5. Turn 5.
Are you sure?
Assume it is.
To throw this session wide open for Max Verstappen. Perez now comes across the line, 25.3, a long way clear of Sainz, and he has hit the real terms top spot. We're looking at Max Verstappen in our commentary box, and it is incredibly close. The Red Bull grazes the outside white line of turn 5. The dust from underneath, the wood from the plank, is kicked up into the air, and it's not immediately clear to us whether he is well off the road, but race control have better angles, have more information than we do, and it is pretty much a slam dunk that he will lose that lap. It's a judge of fact. There's no going back on that, and he'll have to go again.
So will Charles Leclerc. Exactly the same reason. His last lap around deleted. He'll have to go again. Perez is then currently fastest, a 1:25.3 for the Mexican driver in the Red Bull, the only man that could try and stand in the way of his teammate Max Verstappen from becoming a champion later on today. Verstappen has to go again, having had a lap time deleted. Sainz in the Ferrari is second. His teammate Leclerc has another bite at the cherry, crosses the line and goes fastest, a 1:25.131. Lando Norris is also out there too, coming across the line looking very quick. His teammate comes first and goes fastest, the Australian rookie, a 1:24.7, but he is displaced less than half a tenth between the two McLarens, who had both of their lap times deleted in Q3 yesterday. Currently, as it stands, 1 and 2 with 2.5 minutes left on the clock.
Leclerc has lost that lap, and it looked to be through the exit of turn 13. To me, looked to be off there. He's also lost the lap through the exit of turn 5, though, much like other drivers have. So Leclerc demoted. Yeah, track limits turn 13. Leclerc demoted back down the pack, does not have a lap time on the board. It's Norris, Piastri, Perez and Sainz who are the only drivers so far who've linked together a lap within the white lines.
So lap time deleted, track limits turn 13. Oh, come on.
He's only going to get, that was Charles Leclerc on the radio, he's only going to get one more go at it. He's on a slow down lap now, 1 minute and 44 on the clock. We're still waiting for lap times from Verstappen, who needs to put in a competitive lap time, having had his one and only one deleted for track limits. Then Russell, Leclerc again, Ocon, Alonso, Hulkenberg, all out there. Hulkenberg and Alonso on out laps at the moment.
Critically, they've not got time now to box and put another set of tyres on. This is it. Perez has chosen to cool the car and go again, and is improving microsector by microsector. That's the sound you can hear, him arcing his way into turn 7 and through the mid-corner of turn 8 in the Red Bull, subtly improving as he makes his way around the lap. George Russell on a lap as well, as is Ocon and Fernando Alonso. Nico Hülkenberg on a lap, but it's the two McLarens that have really done the job here. Max Verstappen now starting again as he makes his way through the first sector.
We're only day 2 into this Qatar Grand Prix weekend, and it has been far from simple or straightforward on a weekend where we can crown our 2023 F1 World Champion later today in the sprint. He's got some work to do. He's currently down in 5th, and Butt is going fastest of anybody in the first sector as teammate Sergio Perez comes across the line, currently in 3rd, improves his time, stays 3rd. It's the two McLarens who have the edge on the rest of the field right now. Leclerc needs to go again as well. George Russell on the Mercedes, what's he got across the line? 3rd fastest for Russell.
Russell, a decent lap, improving in all 3 sectors, but not enough to oust the two McLarens. Verstappen is purple in sector 1, and Perez has lost that lap for track limits in turn 4 and will be demoted back down the field.
It's still quicker than Ocon's time. He comes across in the Alpine. It's 5th fastest for Esteban Ocon. Then comes Sainz, who is out there as well and needs to find some time coming into the middle sector. Max Verstappen has actually lost a little bit of time in the middle sector, rounds the final corner. What has the Dutchman got as he comes across the line? It's only 3rd fastest for Max Verstappen on a weekend where he can clinch the championship. He will not start the sprint race from the front row. At best, it will be 3rd. Nico Hülkenberg in the Haas comes across the line and gets 5th. But what can the two Ferraris do? It's the two McLarens who have 1 and 2 sewn up right now. Leclerc comes across the line. He's had lap times deleted left, right and centre. Let's hope this one stays. It's enough for 5th fastest. Lando Norris is finding time. His teammate displaces him for the time being though. Piastri takes pole for the sprint. Can Norris find time? He runs out wide in the final corner. Does Lando Norris lose his time? Comes across the line, doesn't improve. Piastri takes pole for the sprint in front of Norris. But what can Fernando Alonso do? Never rule out the wily old fox. Comes across the line and it's a top 5 start in 5th for Fernando Alonso. What an end to the sprint shootout, setting the grid for our sprint race later on today, and it will be Piastri who once again starts on the front row for an F1 race. This time he'll have the best view in the house from P1 for the sprint race later this evening ahead of Lando Norris. It's a McLaren 1-2, Verstappen 3rd, Russell, Alonso the top 5, Sainz ahead of Leclerc, then Hülkenberg, Perez down in 9th, and Ocon the top 10.
Oscar, I do believe that is P1. Great job.
Woo! Nice. Very, very, very nice. Thank you. Wow, that was unexpected.
Everyone's too scared to call it pole, aren't they, in the sprint? But it is pole for the sprint. It is a P1 starting point. And Piastri has a habit of doing that, Rosanna, doesn't he? Think back to Belgium and Spa, got onto the podium, technically his first podium in Formula 1, but it didn't quite count that stage. But Oscar Piastri is really coming to the fore now, and so are both of those McLarens.
Oh, fantastic stuff from the Australian rookie driver, and I quite like that. Woohoo! Suddenly showing a bit of enthusiasm and excitement because he's been so mature and so sort of level-headed, hasn't he, throughout this season? But wow, well deserved to pip his teammate to the post, and it seemed like Lando Norris under a little bit of pressure there as he let it go on that final turn, and Max Verstappen in P3. A little bit of work to do for himself this afternoon or this evening, and the sound you're hearing is Max Verstappen as we ride on board with him when he was making some of those little mistakes, querying his race engineer, wasn't he, about whether he really had crossed the line. But well, I tell you what, there'll be some fans. I think you might be able to hear some of the cheering going on. Some fans of Oscar Piastri pleased to see the Australian rookie on pole.
It's got a good ring to it.
Almost as good a ring to do it as the familiarisation session as well. So Oscar Piastri getting out of his papaya-coloured McLaren, just putting the steering wheel back where it belongs, and raises his fist to the sky, and he's going to get up on the top of his car. Oh, I thought he was. No, he's actually thought better of it. He's going to hop straight out. But yes, wow, what a year this guy's having with a car that started the season in woeful form, and he puts his forefinger up 1, P1, pole position, whatever you want to call it. He'll start ahead of everybody else in the sprint later on. What do you make of that drive then, Alex?
Absolutely brilliant drive to take a first career pole in let's call it a pole, in any format. And incredible for McLaren as well. I half expect them to sort of stand there and go, after losing both of their qualifying times, just after qualifying yesterday, go, are you absolutely sure that we haven't lost those laps? But first McLaren 1-2 in any format since 2012. Utterly brilliant driving from the pair of them. Just that little mistake from Lando Norris, but he's still got the job done to park the other papaya car on the other side of the grid.
Well, you mentioned lap times deleted, Alex. We have had one. It's Fernando Alonso. Track limits for the number 14 car at turn 14 for Fernando Alonso. That drops him down at the moment to 9th place. Nothing else has come through yet, but we saw yesterday in qualifying, by the time we got to the interviews, that was when the drivers were being told about their track limits violation. So Alonso is the first one to fall at the hurdle, but for Piastri, for the 21-year-old Australian rookie, backed, mentored by Mark Webber, multiple Grand Prix winner, as Piastri gets a cheer from the grandstands as he walks out onto the main straight and is handed a microphone. Let's hear from him. He will be interviewed once again by Naomi Schiff, and just once again demonstrating fantastic speed for Oscar Piastri.
Oscar, I am so glad that we get to do this again, and I have to say a massive congratulations to you. An outstanding performance out there for the first time on this track ever, and for the first time starting a Formula One event from the top spot. How are you feeling?
Yeah, very, very happy. I might just give the FAA 5 minutes first to make sure I'm actually on pole, but as long as that's okay, then no, very, very happy. Yeah, was a pretty good lap. I saw Lando on the big screen, made a mistake at the last corner, so I don't know what his lap was looking like, but no, very, very happy.
It seemed like the drivers had a lot to contend with out there again today, a lot of deleted track times, but also there were a lot of changes made to the track this morning. So how was it out there for you?
Yeah, it changes it a bit. I think also, because it's a painted curb, it's impossible to know where it is. We can't see it, so yeah, it makes things a bit more difficult, but obviously it's the same for everyone. So yeah, very, very happy. I think struggled quite a bit in the first two parts of that qualifying, and then got my act together a bit more for the last one. So no, very, very happy, and yeah, great work from the team.
Well, lastly, the team have done a fantastic job, as you say, to get this car where it is today, and you also did a great job today. But do you think it's going to be possible to seal that victory later on in the sprint today?
We'll see. Obviously, Max is only starting third, so yeah, he's not a million miles away, but yeah, we'll try our best. Obviously, a bit of a question mark on tyres, but yeah, we'll try our best and see what we can pull off.
Okay, well, fantastic. For the time being, I can confirm to you, you are still on pole position for later today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Oscar Piastri talking to Naomi Schiff out on the start-finish straight. And Alex, I just think on a day where there's been quite a lot of confusion, schedule change, we've added in a familiarisation practice session, an emergency session, so that the drivers could familiarise themselves with the new track layout. Then a sprint shootout, which is always frenetic and frantic. It's a rookie on top. Oscar Piastri is the real deal, isn't he?
When you listen to Oscar Piastri in that interview, it's very believable that is the guy who is on pole position after the day that we've just had. The calmness with which he engages with Formula One is truly impressive at his age. And the calmness of mind for him is, I think, really, with everything, with the continuous moving target that has been this sprint Saturday so far, has been what's gained him that position. Let's see what he can do in the race, which is, of course, coming up later on.
He just looks smilier and smilier with each race weekend he gets under his belt. And of course, with a car underneath him now that he can fight for podiums and potentially wins, I imagine that smile's going to get even broader. But just to put a little dampener on things, of course, he's going to be lining up alongside his teammate Lando Norris for the sprint. And he's got Max Verstappen hungry to take that third title this evening here in Qatar. Do the McLarens have enough in the tank, Harry, to hold Max Verstappen back? And OK, it's 2 versus 1, Perez further down the road in P8, but wouldn't it be nice to see the McLarens hold on to that top spot, if only in the sprint?
as a neutral fan, I mean, absolutely. When it comes to the two McLarens, I think we can say Lando Norris has the better race pace out of the moment between the two drivers. Piastri still has a bit of understanding and learning to do when it comes to managing tyres, but that could well play into his favour because the sprint is obviously a shorter race. There's less of it to manage, but because we've had these tyre issues so far this weekend, this is a track that's also very difficult to overtake. The majority of the overtakes from 2021 were done on the main straight, which is the one and only DRS point. So that does mean I think it's not as clean cut for Max Verstappen to be able to carve through, but he's carved through the field from lower positions before, so you can never rule him out.
Absolutely not. So Oscar Piastri on top spot after that sprint shootout. He'll line up alongside his teammate Lando Norris with Max Verstappen and George Russell on the second row for the sprint later on. We will be live at 6:25. Hopefully you'll join us then. Of course, getting that sprint done and dusted before we head into the Qatar Grand Prix tomorrow. My thanks to Andrew Benson, Alex Brundle and Harry Benjamin for talking us through an interesting Saturday afternoon. Hopefully you'll join us for the sprint a little later on. It's been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.